Trump tried to chain Africa with his tariffs, but instead, Africa rose and turned those chains into the fire of freedom. I stand before you not as a petitioner, not as a subordinate waiting for permission from another power, but as the elected head of a sovereign nation, and as the son of a continent that has been told too many times to kneel. Mr. Trump, you threw your tariffs across the ocean like chains. You believed they would shackle our trade, crush our spirit, and drag us back into the posture of begging. But you miscalculated. Burkina Faso is not the child you once thought Africa to be. We are a nation of proud farmers, miners, engineers, students, soldiers, mothers, and fathers who will not barter away our dignity for the shifting promise of an American market that moves like desert sand in the wind. You demanded that we accept tariffs on our gold, our cotton, our cocoa, our food, the very lifeblood of our economy. You called it policy. We call it what it is, coercion dressed as commerce. For decades, our leaders accepted this cycle. Tariffs, sanctions, conditional aid, structural adjustments, different masks on the same face. And for decades, Africa bent, because bending seemed the only way to survive. But I have walked among the people of my country. I have seen the mines where foreign corporations carried away riches and left only dust. I have seen farmers watch their harvest rot because contracts signed in distant capitals priced them out of their own markets. I have buried soldiers who died defending villages the West preferred to treat as pieces on a chessboard. My people did not elect me to continue that story. They elected me to end it. So when you sent your tariffs, I did not summon my ministers to tremble over spreadsheets, calculating how much pain we must endure before crawling back to you for mercy. I did not gather economists to measure how quickly our reserves would bleed away or how many months our farmers could survive without your markets. Instead, I called my cabinet and asked a different question. The question every sovereign nation must ask at least once in its life. How do we live without the United States? How do we build a future where no leader, whether in Washington, Paris, London, or any other capital, can wake up one morning, pick up a pen, and decide to punish us for daring to stand upright? How do we ensure our children's lives are not hostage to the moods of a foreign government? Within 72 hours, we had our answer, because we had been preparing for this moment quietly for years. We activated agreements painstakingly signed with our African brothers and sisters under the Continental Free Trade Area. We called the presidents of Ghana, Kenya, Senegal, South Africa, Nigeria, and beyond. And they did not hesitate. Our ports, warehouses, and banks began talking to each other across borders like never before. We redirected shipments of gold not only to Moscow and Beijing, but to every partner who offered respect instead of conditions. We rewrote shipping schedules overnight. We opened our granaries to new markets in Asia and Latin America, where buyers had long waited for the chance to deal with us directly. We put our cotton, cocoa, livestock, and grain onto new ships bound for new harbors, bypassing the stranglehold you thought you had built. In the space of 3 days, the threat became an opportunity. Isolation became integration. What was meant as a blow to our economy became the spark that fused us closer to our neighbors. Those phone calls, emergency meetings, sleepless nights in our ministries were not filled with panic, but with a strange exhilaration. At last, we were acting, not reacting. You tried to break us apart, but instead you pushed us together. You tried to teach us submission, but you forced us into self-reliance. The change you threw became the fire that tempered our steel. I say this not to boast, but to teach. Because what we have done is not a miracle reserved for one nation. It is a discipline that any free people can choose. For too long, the West has relied on our fear, like a banker counting on interest. Fear that sanctions would starve our people. Fear that tariffs would crush our exports. Fear that defiance would lead to isolation. That fear was the invisible chain keeping our leaders tied to old masters long after the flags of independence were raised. But fear is a weapon that only works while we believe in it. It works only while we whisper to ourselves that we are too small to stand, too poor to resist, too divided to act. I stopped believing in that whisper the day I first put on a soldier's uniform and marched across the scorched earth of my country. I saw foreign contractors in shining four-wheel drives splashing through mud as starving villagers walked barefoot. I heard their polished talk of stability and development, while I held reports of villages burned and roads never built. I stopped believing the day I held a government audit showing tons of our gold leaving year after year for distant refineries, while our children studied under leaking roofs without books. I stopped believing the day I looked into the faces of widows of soldiers who died fighting insurgents armed with weapons that flowed through the very channels of those who claimed to be our partners. And I stopped believing the day you tried to make my country an example of what happens to those who say no. You thought to frighten us. But instead, you tremble. You meant to write a cautionary tale for Africa. Instead, you wrote a story of courage. Now the example is you, Mr. Trump. The world has seen that even a small, landlocked nation can refuse and survive. Can refuse and still trade. Can refuse and still stand upright. We have proven that the size of a nation is not measured in square kilometers or GDP figures, but in the strength of its spine. And this is the lesson. Once a people stop believing in the power of your fear, that power vanishes like smoke. Sanctions lose their sting. Tariffs lose their teeth. Threats lose their echo. What remains is a free nation facing another free nation, deciding whether to build a bridge or a wall. That is all we ever wanted. And that is what we now demand. I speak directly to you and your advisors. You think this is a personal quarrel between me and you. It is not. It is a clash between two visions of the world. Yours says trade is a whip to crack over weaker nations until they submit. Mine says trade is a bridge between equals, built on respect and reciprocity. Yours says Africa's role is to supply and obey. Mine says Africa's role is to choose and to lead. I do not hate America. Many of our sons and daughters live there, study there, and send back knowledge and remittances. But I will never allow love for America to become subservience to America. Friendship cannot be built on threats. Partnership cannot be built on punishment. I know what your allies whisper in their conference rooms and embassy corridors. They lean toward each other and say, "He is young. He is reckless. He does not understand the cost." They say it in English, in French, in cables sent back to their capitals. They think my age is a weakness. That my generation confuses passion for policy, that we lack patience for strategy. But I know the cost. My entire life has been a study in cost. I have seen the cost of obedience, the slow, silent erosion of sovereignty until a proud people forget how to stand upright. I have seen the cost of silence, dignity shriveling as leaders nod at every demand, smile at every insult, and sign agreements they have not read. I have seen the cost of fear, a future pawned away. Children leaving for foreign shores because they see no hope at home. Farmers uprooting their own crops to plant those that please someone else's markets. That is why I am willing to pay a different cost, the cost of courage. Courage is not cheap. It isolates you from old friends. It tests your economy. It demands sleepless nights and the heavy burden of responsibility for every consequence. But courage is the only investment that yields freedom. It is the price of being able to look your people in the eye. To tell your children you did not sell their birthright for a handshake. So you cannot frighten me with your graphs, your GDP figures, your credit ratings, your forecasts of market access. I have seen war. I have seen my people bleed. Not in some abstract spreadsheet, but on the soil where I was born. I have held the hands of widows, orphans, and wounded soldiers who fought for a country that barely had boots to give them. There is no tariff high enough, no sanction heavy enough, no thread dark enough to make me betray them. If you think numbers on a screen will make me bow, then you do not understand me. And you do not understand the new Africa rising in your shadow. You wanted Africa to crawl back to your table. But Africa now builds its own. I will not stand before the world begging for a few crumbs of access. No. Instead, Africa has closed its ranks. From Dakar to Dar es Salaam, from Lagos to Lusaka, leaders called me, not to whisper that I was reckless, but to declare that at last someone had spoken aloud the truth that burns in every African heart. For too long, we were quiet. Now we have begun to trade more with each other than with you. We are building our own payment systems, our own credit lines, our own transport corridors. Every day, the old dependence shrinks and the new shield grows stronger. And yes, for that acceleration, Mr. Trump, we must thank you. Some accuse me of speaking with a harsh tongue. But I speak harshly only because history has spoken harshly to us. For centuries, our lands were carved, our people stolen, our resources drained. We were told it was for our own good, for civilization, for development. And today the story is dressed in new words. Free trade, security, stability. But always the pattern is the same. We give. Others take. We labor. Others profit. We stand. Others command. That pattern ends here. We will not forever be the continent of cheap labor and raw materials. We will be the continent of factories, of innovators, of negotiators who decide their own worth. And no tariff will hold back that transformation. Mr. Trump, you think tariffs are hammers. You think you can lift them and strike us at will, expecting each blow to shatter us. But I have seen the forge at dawn. I have watched blacksmiths strike iron. When you strike iron, yes, you may bend it. But you may also strengthen it. You may sharpen it into a weapon more enduring than before. That is what your tariffs have done. You thought they would crush us. Instead, they have hardened us. They have made our will less fragile, our plans more disciplined, our vision more urgent. Your tariffs, meant to divide, have forged African unity. They forced us back to our own maps, our own ports, our own railways, asking the questions we had too long delayed. How do we move goods, services, and ideas among ourselves? They made us dust off agreements that once sat idle and breathe life into them. They showed us that the real market is not Washington, not Paris, but the one. For billion men, women, and children who live on this continent. For decades, our economists counted success only in how much we exported to you, how many dollars we borrowed from you, how many investors came flying from your capitals. Now, because of your hammer, our reports count differently. They measure contracts signed between Lagos and Dar es Salaam, between Ouagadougou and Nairobi, between our ports and Asia, between our farmers and Latin America. You thought you were slamming doors. Instead, you opened windows. Your tariffs have forced us to strengthen bonds with partners who treat us with dignity, not disdain. They have taught us to negotiate as equals, to demand fair terms, to value respect above profit. They have exposed which so-called partners see us as pawns, and which see us as people. They have forced us to understand that dignity in trade is worth more than temporary profit. Above all, your tariffs forced us to prepare for a future without you. And once a people prepare for freedom, freedom comes. Once you learn to breathe without a ventilator, you no longer fear someone pulling the plug. Once you build your own house, you no longer fear eviction. That is what is happening now in Africa. We are hammering our own steel on our own anvils. And the sound you hear across this continent is not the sound of breaking, it is the sound of forging. Do not mistake me. I do not travel to your capital to lecture. I do not stand on your podium to insult. I speak here in my capital, to my people and to the world, because this is what sovereignty looks like. We will trade with America if America respects us. We will work with America if America treats us as equals. But we will never kneel. Not for dollars. Not for access. Not for threats. This is not hatred of America. This is self-respect. And I say this directly to every African child listening to me now. You were not born to be a supplier of cheap goods to someone else's empire. You were born to create, to build, to lead. Do not let anyone convince you that your country is too small to stand tall. Burkina Faso is small, yes, but our spine is strong. We have chosen to stand, and we are still standing. So can you. To the world's media who act astonished, do not mistake our calm for weakness. We are calm because we are prepared. Do not mistake our youth for ignorance. We are young, yes, but this is the arrival of a new generation. Do not mistake our rejection of one policy for rejection of the world. We welcome the world, but on our terms. And our terms are simple: respect, fairness, and mutual benefit. Bring that, and Africa will be your greatest partner. Bring tariffs, threats, ultimatums, and you will meet a continent learning to live without you. I extend my hand still, not as a subordinate, but as an equal. America can yet be our friend, but friendship must be chosen, never forced. That is the lesson of this hour. You cannot coerce dignity. You cannot tariff sovereignty. You cannot sanction self-respect. You cannot embargo freedom. Enough of what we reject. Let me speak of what we will build. We will build factories to process our own minerals, banks to fund our entrepreneurs, roads and railways to link our farms to our cities to each other, our ports to the world. We will build governments that answer to their people, not to foreign embassies. We will build an Africa where no youth has to cross deserts or seas to find dignity, because dignity will live here, in our soil, in our homes. And yes, we will build partnerships. With East and West, with North and South. With anyone who respects this vision. This is not fantasy. It has begun. The African Continental Free Trade Area is binding us together. The Pan-African payment system is breaking our dependence on the dollar. BRICS and other alliances are opening new financial channels. Our farmers are sending crops to Asia. Our miners are negotiating directly with the Middle East. Our tech innovators are drawing investment from everywhere. Every new step makes your tariffs less effective and our sovereignty more secure. You may call this defiance. I call it adulthood. A child obeys because it has no choice. An adult chooses because it has freedom. Africa is becoming an adult in the family of nations. Treat us as such. And to my fellow Africans, remember, this is not about one man or one country. I will one day leave office. Others will take my place. But the principle must outlive us all. Sovereignty is not for sale. Today it is Burkina Faso. Tomorrow it may be Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, South Africa. Each act of courage makes the next one easier. Each refusal weakens the old chains and strengthens the new foundation. Mr. Trump, let me say this as plainly as I can. You cannot build a wall high enough to block African dignity. You cannot write a tariff list long enough to erase our self-respect. You cannot bully a continent into silence once it has found its voice. The days of easy intimidation are over. The days of equal partnership, if you wish them, can begin. And I will close as I began. I am not your enemy. I am not your subordinate. I am the president of a sovereign nation, speaking for a sovereign people. I will shake your hand if you extend it in respect. But if you extend it with chains, you will find it empty. We are no longer afraid. We are ready. And to every child who hears me, know this. You are the generation that will finish what we have started. You will build the Africa that no tariff can break. You will write the contracts, set the prices, and choose the partners. You will not inherit fear. You will inherit freedom. That is my promise to you. That is my challenge to you. Stand tall. Work hard. Believe in yourselves. And never kneel. This is my answer to tariffs. This is my answer to threats. This is my answer to every demand built on the lie that Africa is weak. We are not weak. We are awake. We are united. And we are done kneeling.